What was the K value?
Carrying capacity.
Very good, carrying capacity, which, if you will, limited the number of individuals that you could have in your population. So your carrying capacity, or K, represents the max population based on a limitation of resources. It also sets a limit on exponential growth. It also instigates or causes natural selection. Let's talk next about selection models or selection methods. And we'll spend a lot of time today working on that. We'll talk about case selection models. As well as R selection models. Case selection makes a direct reference to density-dependent selection models. Whereas R selection is based on density-independent models. Now there's some facts that we should note for each type. So for K-selected species, typically it works out that there's a great amount of competition. So there's a large amount of competition. There's a long maturation time. With typically late breeding. When the offspring are birthed, the offspring are typically larger. And there's typically fewer offspring. But much more parental support. Now this supposes the R-selected type of species, which typically are more opportunistic, have a short maturation time, they also typically produce many offspring. However, these types of offspring have virtually no parental support. And the offspring are typically smaller. A good example of a K-selected species would be a human or ape, whereas a bacteria or insects would fall into this category. Let's talk next about. Oh, me?
Yeah. So are most mammals like gate selection?
Yeah, most anything that's advanced. The trend would be to go this route.
Okay.
Yeah. To put your energy into raising good young instead of raising more young,
Okay.
basically.
Which is better for natural selection?
To give your unique young more of a shot than try to produce like different unique youngs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
In the case of density independent, this is a case in which the birth rate and the death rate, your vital statistics, are not dependent on the population size. In the case of density dependent, the birth and death rate, though, are dependent on size. Cool. Little Mr. Fields. Little compost, my God. What'd he say? What does that mean? Nice. I guess. For next, let's talk about some density dependent factors. And then we'll talk about some density independent factors. So a density dependent factor that would change your survivability would have to be something that would be based on the number of individuals that were around you. So the more individuals, then the worse off it is for you. Like for instance, predation. Would a line go to the direction of the herd of zebras or where there's just one zebra? The herd. So when there's more people around you, there's more of a likelihood for predation to occur to you. When there's more individuals around, there's more competition. Parasites, like a fungal infection, would be more detrimental if you were surrounded by a lot of people than just only you, right? Or a disease, like the flu. Flu is worse in cases of high population or high density areas. Now,
Bubonic plague.
good one. Bubonic plague is another good example. Some density independent factors are fires or floods. Or habitat limitation. If there was a fire in a building, that fire starts really probably indifferently of the number of individuals that are in that building. So in other words, like when a fire starts, when the accident happens, electrical or whatever the source is, probably it's not because there's too many people, probably just because there was that accident, it was meant to happen. Now, these guys over here, any one of them, can become density dependent factors if you have it in the right context. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I was the only person in the building and a fire started. The fire is going to be a not density independent factor. But what if I said there was a fire that had started and this building is packed full of people for some unique reason? Now you have a density dependent factor. Do you understand the difference? It's all about context. Is there only one individual, or are there a lot of individuals? If there's a lot of individuals, something can start from a density independent method, like a fire can. Fires typically start by just one person or one accident. It's not density dependent, it's density independent. But maybe your escape out, like through the stairs or whatever, now it could be density dependent. You understand the context is important here? Yes? Okay. Let's talk about this a little bit more detail, or in more detail than we did yesterday, and that's human population growth. Human population growth. Of course, this is the number of years since the dawn of man. Here's the number of individuals. And what we see is that we basically stood around, did nothing, and all of a sudden we boomed upward, and we're on this upward curve. And here we are today at about 8 billion, depending on what book you read. And a forecast would predict any one of the following events. Maybe we're very close, maybe we are very far apart. But regardless of if we're close or far, we could talk about the time frame when this started to happen. About when did this start to happen? Industrial Revolution. And what was the root cause? Like, why could our population soar? Fossil fuels. Yeah, right. The ability to use fossil fuels. And our population, I can't be sure, none of us could be sure on what line you approach, but regardless, our population is going to approach this K value, which is for what? Right, your carrying capacity. And Alex, what is your carrying capacity? Madeline? Carrying. Booyah! When you reach that limit, right? Now, here's the deal. If you talk about squirrel carrying capacity, when they reach their limit, that limit isn't like they're running out of it. That's their sustainable limit of that resource. What is our resource that we've exploited here? Fossil fuels. Are they sustainable on any level? No. So we actually are a unique creature in that as we increase our population, our carrying capacity actually goes down. See, for most creatures, their carrying capacity is a set number. There's enough trees for X number of squirrels. Now imagine though, here's what we're doing that would, let me give you the squirrel analogy bit with us. What if the squirrels cut down the trees? Every time they cut down a tree, there's one less place to live, right? For another squirrel in the future. That's what we're doing like with our fossil fuels. As we increase our population, we're decreasing our carrying capacity because it costs oil to have a child. You're like, no, it doesn't. Yeah, it does. I mean, it truly does. Just the fact of having a baby is going to cost like so much oil and plastics, right? So I mean, there's tons of resources that are used of fossil fuels. We're reaching a point now. Some people would debate that we've actually gone above carrying capacity, and that because carrying capacity is coming down so quickly, we've gone above it already, and we're just waiting for the time to catch. Now, I would say that's unlikely. I don't think we're anywhere close to it. But I can promise you, unlike a lot of creatures, when we do reach it, we're going to shoot way above it, and we're going to have